Judy Blume Forever is a documentary about the prolific writer Judy Blume. Here's a bit about Judy's background for those who may not know, a lot of which I didn't know. I always knew the name Judy Blume, knew that she was a writer. She wrote like young adult fiction primarily, but I personally didn't know too much more than that. First off, she was born in 1938. She is 85 years old and sharp as a fucking tack, which hopefully writing has something to do with that level of longevity and health so that I have something to look forward to. But she's an American writer of mainly children's and young adult fiction. She began writing in 1959 and published more than 25 novels. She has sold over 82 million copies worldwide, and they have been translated into 32 languages. Round of a fucking applause for Judy Blume, the prolific Judy Blume. Amongst her most notable works are Tiger Eyes, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which now, by the way, 50 years later is being made into a feature film. She finally licensed it, although she's been approached obviously for decades, but it just hasn't come to fruition because according to her, they just the ideas for the film and the filmmakers that have approached her just didn't do her novel justice. But finally, she found the right situation to move that project forward, and that, as you all know, is definitely I would imagine a dream come true for her, but definitely for me would be a dream come true to see a written work of mine on the big screen or even the little screen, but I digress. Also, Tales from a Fourth Grade Nothing is another notable work of hers, Deanie as well, and Blubber. Here is the official synopsis of the documentary, which, by the way, is available on Amazon Prime for you all to check out if you're interested. Judy Blume and the generations of readers who have sparked to her work. The documentary will examine her impact on pop culture and the occasional controversies over her frankness about puberty and sex. And a large part of the fanfare and attraction, if you will, to her work is the fact that she wrote about some taboo topics. Taboo at the time, and probably even now within certain circles, but things like sex and going through puberty and like girls getting their period for the first time and beginning to develop, and boys and girls having crushes and what relationships are at a young age and what they mean and what they could mean. And she gave color and context and answers to a generation of kids that in the 1970s and beyond, because her books are still very popular, to these questions that kids have as they're going through these like changes in their development and in their lives. And in doing so, she was definitely which was a very interesting part about this documentary. It highlighted to me how the more things change, the more things stay the same. There was a big push to ban her books and to censor her, especially during the Reagan administration, which was very similar to certain voices that we hear now about banning certain books and teachings, etc. And I had never known about like that part of like Judy Blume's writing history. And regardless of where you fall on that spectrum of should books be banned or not, should certain topics be banned or not, at what age are certain topics age appropriate, etc., etc. It's interesting to me to see that same type of mentality and argument on both sides recurring decades later. And again, just reinforces the more things change, the more they stay the same. But what I really enjoyed of the documentary, aside from just like learning more about Judy Blume and how prolific she is as a writer, is what? If you guys know me, you know what I like. Yep, you guessed it. The behind the scenes, coming of age, how the sausage got made story within the story. So she was a housewife after getting married to her first husband. Actually, let me take a step back. She was born and raised in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and her father was like a gregarious type of character in her life and always pushed her to like dream and strive and be adventurous and try different things. And she was super, super close with her dad. Eventually she grows up, she's engaged to be married, wedding day is set, and she tells a story about how her brother came back from the Navy, I believe it was. He was in the armed forces, either the Navy or Coast Guard, and they were all together, and the father was like, super happy and saying, what a great time it is for our family, all of us together again. Judy's about to get married. My son is home safe, etc. And then he has a heart attack right there, starts to have a heart attack, and he says something to the effect of, "Fuck, what horrible timing." And he died. And she said how her father's family, like, they all died like very young, like in their 50s, 60s, I think 50s. And then she went on to get married. She had a couple children, a boy and a girl, and she was a housewife. And she loved the aspects of, being with the kids and raising the kids. And the kids are in the documentary too, and describe her as being like very childlike and always playing with them and stuff like that. And this is when she began writing, because she wanted something to do. Her husband was very like old school traditional. He was kind of like, "I don't give a shit what you do, as long as the food is on the table when I get home. If you want to write, as long as the food is on the table when I get home and the kids are taken care of, do whatever you want in terms of like your quote unquote little writing thing or whatever." And so she did, and she did that for many years. She wrote for a long time. She would submit her writing to like book publishers or agents, and she would get rejections. And she described getting her first rejection and then the subsequent rejections after that. And the first one, she said she wanted to like lock herself in the closet and start crying. And then after that, she was kind of like, "No, fuck this. I do have something to say. I do have something to share. I'll show them," like that type of attitude. And took like each subsequent rejection in stride with using that mentality. Then her husband actually knew someone in the industry. He was a lawyer, I believe, and he knew someone in the industry and gave them her manuscript, and they agreed to publish it for, I believe she said something to the effect of like $250 to $350. And she said she was like just like over the moon, fucking, I made it, excited, fulfilled, a feeling that she said she never had again, even given all her obviously much more success thereafter. And then from there, she just kept at it and ballooned up to the aforementioned 82 million copies of her books sold worldwide. Something interesting that I actually took away from the documentary as well is she put her address out for kids and people that read her books to write to her. And she had a ton of pen pals. And these kids would just write her, letter after letter after letter. I think they said something to the effect of thousands and thousands and thousands of her letters have been archived. And she went through some of them like during the documentary. But kids would write her about their problems, about their concerns, about things that they couldn't speak to their parents or about rather, and thanking her for explaining things in her books. And she would write back to some of them. And some of those kids, some of which were dealing with like thoughts of suicide, and mind you, this is back in the 70s, 80s. So people in general, let alone kids, had less outlets for expression, right? But she had these pen pal types of relationships. And this one girl in particular, they wrote back and forth for years. And she actually invited Judy and her husband at the time, which was her third and last husband, by the way. Well, let me not say last, because like I said, she is a very sharp 85-year-old. She might want to switch things up. But this girl invited her and her husband to her college graduation, and she actually went. And they showed like pictures of them at the graduation, and the girl was like that her classmates and stuff like that were like, "What the hell is Judy Blume doing here? Does she have a daughter that goes here or something?" So that was definitely a pretty dope thing for her to do. And I couldn't help but wonder if we fast forwarded the timeline and Judy was writing now these books and certain topics that she wrote then, and having this like pen pal type of relationship with kids, how much more of a controversy would it have been or be? And also flip it if it was a male writer as opposed to a female writer, and having this like pen pal interaction with kids and speaking about certain sexualized topics. And I think my mind went there just based on all the recent controversies with the, call for banning of books and folks claiming that kids are being sexualized too early, and when is a good age to introduce topics of quote unquote sex ed and stuff like this. And I think in that scenario would be a huge controversy. But then flip it to what it actually is. Judy Blume, a female writer, speaking about all these topics, pen pals with boys and girls, And you just have like all these wonderful, positive stories that came out of it and life experiences for all those folks. So I don't know, it's just interesting food for thought there. And now Judy Blume is just chilling. She says the last book that she wrote was going to be her last, which I believe was in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And she and her husband opened up a bookstore in Key West in Florida. And they showed in the documentary how people are like always calling and they're like, is Judy there? And the staff is like, yeah, she's here. She's going to be here till around 2 if you want to pop by and see her. People like go by to like take pictures with her and get books signed, etc., etc. She definitely seems to be enjoying it. And my biggest takeaway from the doc is that I wish I knew her. Like, she just has this like type of engaging energy that you're like, fuck, I want to know that person. I want to be within her orbit. I want to at least meet her once. And that's coming from someone that hasn't read any of her books yet. So I can imagine how much more that's exacerbated for the folks that have been reading her work for decades. She does have a masterclass. And after learning more about her, like through this documentary, I definitely bumped that masterclass up in my list to be the next one that I take. So there is that. And also worth mentioning, Charlemagne has a sit-down interview with Judy Blume. That's definitely worth watching as well. And I will link to that in the episode notes. And that, folks, is my little recap and review of Judy Blume Forever. The documentary is available right now on Amazon. Check it out.